All right, today, so we are joined by the NRL's youngest ever non-playing coach. Pleasure to introduce Nathan Brown. Thanks for joining us on the Buy Round.
No worries, Jimmy. Not a problem. Good to be
here. So, mate, I guess you took us all by surprise earlier this year, not by just your decision to step away from the coaching role or the head coaching role at the Warriors, but also to hang up the clipboard completely. Can you just talk us through why and how you come to that conclusion?
The hardest thing, I suppose, with coaching is there's not many jobs in the world. There's limited in England and there's limited in Australia. And getting a coaching job is based on opinion, basically. I always feel there's numbers of good coaches out there over the time that you don't see get an opportunity because maybe the club they go to, that the people making the decisions don't have the opinion they need, I suppose. And so it's a very limited field. And basically, if you're not prepared to move, it's very, very hard to get a job in rugby league as a coach, if that makes sense. So for me, at this stage, I've still got daughters and a son that needs a dad at home. And unfortunately, I suppose they're at the stage now, not so much my son, but my daughters are all at the stage where another move is not something they want to do. And it's I can understand. I think my oldest daughter went to 11 schools, and so I can appreciate where they're at in their stage of lives. And when they're little babies and 6, 7, 8, 9, it's much easier to move them to when they start to get to 17, 14, that type of age, because they start to think that where they live is the only spot in the world, and they get close to people. And so it just was the situation that just arose. And so my oldest daughter had been to 11 schools, and so they get to a stage where moving's obviously a bit more difficult when they get older. When they're younger, 8, 9, 10, 4, 3, babies, moving's a difficult task for mum or the wife, but it's not a difficult task for kids, But when they get to a stage of life where they sort of the teenage years, they start to think that's the only spot in the world to live and they're the only friends they're going to make, and so moving becomes a bit more of an issue. And it wasn't that I didn't want to coach, and I still loved it and I still enjoy coaching. It's just that once you narrow your field, there's probably Craig Bellamy and maybe one or two other coaches that can have a limited area where they want to work, but most coaches need to be prepared to move to get work. That's the way it is. And obviously me being in the situation of not being prepared to move, it makes a very, very limited field. And so working in rugby league, if you're not going to be coaching, you need to look at other ways to work in rugby league.
But I'm going to pick you up on something here. You live in the Shire, so you're only an hour away from 8 or 9 other NRL clubs?
Yeah, there is. I'm not sure what the number of clubs is in Sydney, but as I said, it's if you want to coach, you got to coach. You can't be out of the game for a long time. So I could sit here now for 3 years and not coach because if you look at the clubs where they've got their coaches, I've already been to the Dragons, so I've been there. They've been to, you look at Cronulla, Fitzy's going to be there for a long time, Robbo's there for a long time, Desi's there for a lifetime. So straight away there's not many jobs. And then if there's 3 clubs come up and there's 20 coaches going for it, are you going to be the right one for that job? So, I was always confident I'd always get another job when I was available to move to lots of places because there's lots of opportunity. When you've got limited opportunity and you've got to provide for young kids, you sometimes got to look at, where's the law of averages here way up.
You also said at this stage, so the kids all leave the nest.
Oh yeah,
because you are only 49.
Yeah, no, I still enjoy coaching. I still really enjoy coaching. But as I said, when you're in a limited field and you understand there's not many jobs available, and there is another generation of coaches starting out. There's a new younger generation coming and clubs go through stages. Well, we've just sort of seen where. Obviously got young Cameron Serraldo coming through as a wanted coach, and you've got Rolsey's coming through. There's some really good young coaches, Dean Young. There's plenty of really good young. Christian Wolf's coming back from St Helens. Oh, well, we think he's coming back from St Helens. I hope I haven't jumped the gun there. But and there comes the stage where clubs go through this period. This happened when I started coaching because Ricky Stewart was a young coach. Obviously, Bellyache had started, and he wasn't a young coach, he'd been coach, but he's the head coach. And as a first-time head coach when he went to Melbourne, and Ricky comes through, then I got a job at the Dragons as a younger coach. But then the changing and done, like we see the Tigers just signed Sheensy, who hasn't coached in the NRL for a long time. So the game goes in trends, and I still like working in rugby league, and I'm quite aware that you may not get an opportunity, so you've got to look at things you can do so you can keep providing.
Yeah, so there is a pressure on the family, because I look at coaching, and I listen to Benji Marshall speak, and he's one of those young coaches that you speak about, and he's had to quit some very lucrative opportunities that he has up until he begins coaching. But he's like, it's all in for me, but it's not just all in for you. Your family's all in as well, and they have to read about the good and the bad, and they have to, some people may look at it as like, well, you got to travel the world, but it's very unstructured, isn't it? And it can
very transient. And today with social media, people, I'm not on social media, I've never been on it, but I know people say nasty things about people. I'm quite aware of that. And the luckiest thing, I suppose, for me and my kids was I retired playing at a young age, firstly, and the only thing they ever known me was as a coach. So there's a big difference between playing and coaching, because as a player, people tend to talk much more nicer about a player as they do about a coach, and if we're being honest. And so my kids have only ever seen me as a coach, and so whenever they've been on social media, they've obviously seen Dad had lots of things said about him over the course of the journey. And my kids are good with it, because I said, if you're going to look on social media, you need to understand that there's going to be people say bad things about Dad, and you've got to accept the bad with the good, or don't get on there, So my kids have been quite lucky from that point of view, I suppose. It's been their whole life. It's not something where, in Benja's case, it's going to get introduced to him at a total different stage of his life, where he's obviously a player who was an elite player. He might have won a golden boot, did he? But he's won his grand final. Was always picked for New Zealand. He was always a high sort of flavour. When he was an older player, he was still very popular, wasn't he? Popular person, popular player. Kids love him, but he'll have times in his coaching career where people won't like him so much, because that's just the nature of coaching.
How as a coach do you deal with that?
I suppose when you're young, when I started when I was young, you got a little bit of, you might get offended when you're young. When you get older, you just understand that all it is opinions. At the end of the day, everyone's got an opinion, and people, if you look at the media, 99% of the media, they're not being nasty to you when they say something negative about you. They're actually just saying what they think. Yeah. And if you learn to take it like that, I'd say go to every media person. I've had some say good things about me, some say not so good, but there is the odd media person that I'm sure the odd coach and odd player have had a problem with, so there might be a bit of an agenda being driven for a certain reason, but as a whole, most people just give an opinion, and if you can actually learn to live with it and take it as an opinion, you can survive and get by.
It's one of those things that it's easy to say but difficult to do. I imagine. Well, whenever I've kind of tried to adopt that attitude as well, but sometimes when someone says something like, I don't know, it just doesn't sit well. Even though I know it's just an opinion, and they paid for it, and they might be right, they might be wrong, but if it's about you, I don't know, you take it. Is it difficult to not take it personally?
When I was young, I used to think it was like, I think this bloke's having a bloody go at me, But then you realise.
Does he not realise the work I've done all week?
But then you realise over time that this bloke's getting paid to do his job, and you're getting paid to do yours, and his opinion is that you're a shit coach, or you've got something wrong, or you're picking the wrong team, or you've signed the wrong, whatever it is. And that's just his opinion. And generally, those opinions are more when you're not doing it, when your team's not doing as well, which that's just the nature of the game we're in, or the nature of the business we're in, because it doesn't matter what the sport is. If a team's not doing so well, there's obvious reasons, and the coach is someone who's at some stage is going to come to the forefront of it. And that's just the nature of the job. And you learn to live with it. If you don't learn to live with it, you don't last as long as I did, or there's some coaches out there now. If you look at Wayne Sheensy's come back in, like them blokes have been going. I did 20 years; they've been there 20 years longer than me. So the ones that don't handle it very well, their gigs are short term and they disappear quickly. Or they learn to handle it. Basically, you learn to live with it.
But so back to what we were talking about earlier. You are only 49, quite recently. So you're not retiring. So what does the future hold for you? I know you've got a role within the pathway system at Parramatta. Is that where you see yourself cementing that type of role? I know obviously you spoke on 360 around you wanted to put something in place to maybe help support some of these younger coaches?
Yeah,
is that where your sort of passion's going?
Ultimately, that'd be good, Jimmy. In the shorter term, I'd like to, work with pathways, help like put time into younger coaches, younger players, help work with the top 30 squad. Because ultimately, recruitment and coaching at the lower level, ultimately that provides a squad for the coach to coach. And people might not necessarily think so, but generally the teams with the best players are generally the teams that are up there. They've got good coaches, but I'd use a great example to look at the difference in what a squad and a club can do for you. Is you look at Michael Maguire, went to Wigan, as you know, very well organised club, well run, well organised at the lower level, recruit well at the higher level. Madge did very well. Went to South. Richo had been there for a period of time, and I believe, Richo went to Cronulla when they were bad and they made a grand final and in the semis. He went to Penrith, they were bad, they won a comp, and then he goes to South. So, either Richo's a very good administrator or he's an extremely lucky bloke. I'd say he's a very good administrator. And so Madge goes to South, which are a very, very well organised club, gets to work with Sam Burgess and Greg Inglis and Adam Reynolds and Luke Keary, and what does he do? He does well. And then he went to the Tigers, where Tigers have been a club who have struggled for a lot of years and very transient with coaches, probably haven't nailed down any one identity they want to be like, and you've seen a big turnover of coaches. Ivan went to Penrith, who've got a very good squad, and Ivan proved, which we all knew Ivan was a good coach, but at Tigers, he didn't make the playoffs, and then Madge went from everywhere he went, winning in playoffs, to the Tigers, where as a club they were struggling, and that's the thing for any young coach making their decision today. They need to be very selective of where they go, because I've seen young coaches come and go quickly in my time, and it doesn't mean they're not a good coach. They just might end up in the wrong job at the wrong time and then get a reputation which is maybe not deserved, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I even look at a guy like Dean Pay, who I've got some friends at Canberra that love Dino's input there. Comes to the Bulldogs, obviously it didn't work out for him, whether that's administration-wise, salary cap management-wise, roster management, all that sort of thing. But now he's off the radar when any job becomes available. Like Dino's name doesn't get mentioned.
Well, if you look at Dino, if you understand the situation he took over there, all Dino did for 2 years was clean a salary cap up. That's all he did. He didn't get an opportunity to show his true wares as a coach. Now, would Dino have been the right coach and the best coach for him? I don't know that, but I certainly know that he never got to work with the quality of play that's at Canterbury now and that's coming to Canterbury next year. Yeah, that's all I do know.
Yeah. So that sort of maybe that is it. Director of football, the kind of job that you'd want to do, or just a guy to bounce idea, an official role.
I'm not so much into titles, James. I know some people love different titles. That I'm like, I'd like to, if I could, whatever. It doesn't really matter what it says I do. If I can look like I can, help coach younger coaches and help put some things in place to help younger coaches, younger players, younger coaches get a good education, and help recruit some players for a top 30, whatever that says it is, it says it is. So I'm not too bothered by what a title says. I'm just that's what I'd sort of like to do in the shorter term, and longer term, just see what happens as the kids grow and things happen. Yeah.
So you obviously came into coaching through some awful circumstances with the neck injury, where you were forced to retire early. Would you say that coaching found you rather than you found it, in terms of you having some unfinished business there?
I always wanted to coach. Always, because my dad was a coach in the bush, and he got coach of the century at 2 clubs in the bush, and I sort of used to go to all of his teams when he coached as a kid and collect the footies, and then all the players would come around home and see Dad, the young ones, and think, that's pretty cool, I'd like to do that, try and do that one day. And so I always had an ambition to try and coach, but obviously starting as young as I did wasn't a part of the ambition. It just sort of evolved, I suppose.
Yeah, and during that time with the Dragons, you were around some very colourful characters. Yeah. How was that as a guy in his late 20s?
It's very
dealing with those, not just personalities, but characters as well. It's a really fine balance.
It is,
of getting it right or getting it very wrong.
Yeah, I got some really steep learning curves early on, in particular. Some really steep ones. Fortunately, I was at a club that gave me great support, and as I said today, I see some of the younger coaches they get put into a job and then they don't get given the support I don't believe they deserve to get, because the Dragons took a chance on me as a young coach, and I certainly got some things wrong and some tough lessons, especially in my initial sort of 12, 18 months. But I got great support from the Dragons, and coaching pretty much a whole group of players who you played with, who you're friends with, it's probably not the smartest decision, I'd tell any young coach, so it's not a problem being, your age is not a problem, but I suppose your experience, your lack of experience of coaching and working with people who you've been friends with, when it becomes mate to boss, and that is a different situation. And there's certainly some things I learnt there and got some things wrong there in the shorter term. And over the course of my time at Saints, we did a lot of good things at Saints, and we helped put a really good squad together, and we come up a game short of the grand final a few times. I've always said, I thought my lack of experience as a coach probably obviously would have cost us a shot at a grand final, but I also felt we did a lot of good things to help put the club in a position to do well as well, But it was a great challenge, and I got great support there. And when I see a young coach going to a club now, when a young coach gets an opportunity after 18 months, the club tips him out. I just believe the clubs, rather than look to sack coaches in the shorter term, especially younger coaches, is why don't you look at what you're doing wrong as an administration, and why don't you look at what the coach needs to help him succeed? Is it more experienced coach? Is it a football director like a Phil Gore? What is it that you can do to actually help him, as opposed to the easy option to sack the coach? Because you see this cycle at some clubs over the course of time, and the same people keep giving the same advice, but sometimes they could do some things a little smarter, a little better to help the coach survive. That's how I see it over my journey. That's all. Yeah,
but they almost. I'm just thinking about what you're saying. Then it's almost like they sit in an echo chamber and say it's not us as administrators. It must be them.
Yeah.
And let's direct the criticism there. And also the unfortunate thing that when a team or a club is under pressure, it seems that action, as opposed to inaction, it seems to portray as if this is what we're doing about it. We're getting rid of the coach, rather than actually we're going to support the coach, because they can't really see that on a day-to-day basis, but they can see the action of, okay, we're going to sever ties.
It's far harder now for a young coach to start out than when I started, and especially if you end up at the wrong club, because when I was in England, I think it was at St Helens when Sir Alex Ferguson, when he retired. And he said, if I started coaching today, I'd get the sack after 18 months and I wouldn't be allowed to stay there. But in their day, there was no Fox shows, no this shows, no podcasts. So now there's so much more shows and so much more awareness of what may or may not be happening. The people that actually select the coach, they're the ones that weaken, aren't they? They falter a bit, They don't have the kahunas to hang in there and say, I need to tough it out here a bit and actually support this bloke. Because the easy thing is sacking the coach. You give him $300 or $400 and move him on, and everyone claps, you've done the great job, and we'll go and get the new toy to play with. That's what it's like for some clubs. We'll just go and get a new toy, or we'll sack all the staff and bring some new toys, and everyone can pat them on the head for 12 months. But they haven't actually solved the problem, and then it keeps happening. A great example for me at the moment is Justin Holbrook. He's went to St Helens, said, well, come back to the Gold Coast. Now, I've never worked under Justin. He's not a friend of mine and all. I don't know him from a bar of soap. But all I know is that last year he signed an extra 3 years at the Gold Coast because everyone thought he's the right coach for the Gold Coast going forward. And they got some things wrong with their recruitment. Everyone can see that, acknowledge that. A team that has rookie half, rookie hooker, rookie half, rookie fullback, they're not doing any good in this competition. That's just life. You can put any coach there, they're not going any good because they're all rookies in key position. It just don't work at the NRL level. They've got that wrong. It appears the Gold Coast are going to support the coach. And it looks like they're going to put things around to help him improve and help him get better. And that's what they should be doing, not turfing him out, because it was only 6 months ago he was apparently the best coach and the right coach for the next 3 years. And this is where, for me, sometimes clubs really, really falter, And as I said, my time at St George, I got great support. At Huddersfield, I got great support. St Helens is a wonderfully, as you know, what a well-organised club it is, So you get a real good chance to make the best account of you. And if you're getting something wrong, someone might tap you on the shoulder and say, how'd you go? We get the support of this type of person, And that's what I think, some clubs in general can do to help the younger coaches these days.
Yeah. Just going on to that, you spoke about England. You did swap the beaches of New South Wales for the streets of Huddersfield.
Yeah.
You had a big job on your hands there, didn't you? You turned them around. They were close to the bottom of the table, if I recall correctly, when you took over.
Yeah.
Did you know much about the challenge you were going into when you took over the reins at Huddersfield?
I'll be honest with you, Jimmy. You know, I knew they were down lower on the ladder. I knew that bit, but I was desperate to keep coaching, and I had a young family who were prepared to move. Well, my kids, they didn't know they were moving anyway. They were just getting told what they were doing back then. They were only little. But my wife was happy to move. And the truth of it was, obviously I was finished up at St George after 6 years, and Wayne was taken over, and there was one job available in rugby league in the world. It was Huddersfield. So I thought, I want to keep coaching. So I had a shot at that job. And I knew they were down low on the ladder, which that didn't bother me. And then when I got there and I watched back at that stage, Huddersfield had only just started sort of putting more stuff into the lower two. I went and watched the under 18s or under 20s play Leeds, and they got beat by 70. And I went, oh shit, geez, we've got some work to do here. So I wasn't quite aware of, I suppose, the enormity of the job there, but it was a wonderful experience and had some great times and got good support from Ken Davey and Richard Thewlish, the chairman and the CEO, and we were obviously a club that was down low, that was striving to become a top four club and then try and challenge the likes of St Helens and Leeds.
And well, you certainly did that, didn't you? By taking them to the 2009 Challenge Cup final. You beat us in the semi-finals as well. I can distinctly remember that day. It was at Warrington's ground, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we had it.
You ambushed us. Yeah, completely ambushed. No, you did. It was a coaching masterclass, I think.
Yeah, well, we had some really, really good times. And I've always said, my third year at Huddersfield, I believe we would have won a trophy that year because we'd sort of pieced the team together over a sort of 3-year period. But we lost Luke O'Donnell and Dave Falonga for the season, like after about 10 weeks, and we were on top of the ladder at that stage, and we had a good shot at it that year. We had some good English. We had a predominantly English side, but we had some really, really good Aussie recruits. Luke O'Donnell, Dave Falonga, and we're a genuine good chance of winning something out there. And Luke did his knee and Dave did his back, so it was sort of like, shit, all this sort of 3 years of prep just went with like 2 injuries, sort of left us a little bit short.
You've coached over here recently and a long time ago, and obviously coaching over there. What do you think the main differences are?
Obviously, one, the money, I suppose, in infrastructure and in the way the game's administered over, there's a lot more money here than in England, but just the amount of people that play is probably the thing, the depth of play and the amount of people that play. And European sport, I suppose, has sort of genuine powerhouses, which doesn't change over like 20, like St Helens have been good for 30 years and Wigan have been good for 30 years, and in Australia, like obviously the Broncos in the 90s and early 2000s, it was like it's never going to end, and Canterbury in the 80s and Manly at times in the 90s with there's periods you think, is this ever going to come to an end this side, or are they just going to be good for where it actually does finish in Australia, where in European sport, Real Madrid and Barcelona, like I can close my eyes now and you know that they're going to be in the top 4, don't you, next year, and in 10 and 20 years time they'll still be there, where in the NRL for that does change under that time. Like, it looks like a side's indestructible for a period, and then all of a sudden, the Bulldogs, you've got these played in 2 grand finals. It's like, is this going to end? And then all of a sudden, it can just bottom out. Yeah. So it's a big difference like that,
I've never thought of it like that, but
you're not as old as me. So.
It's very true. No, it's very true. One of the things I noticed, and we spoke about it a little bit before, is the sort of the media attention, where it's not as much as a big deal over there, is it? And over here it certainly is. Well,
at Huddersfield, and the guys were falsely accused, but we had 5 blokes on a rape charge. I was on a footy camp and actually got locked up in cell for a night. And as it all worked out, it was the young girl had done the wrong thing, so nothing had happened untoward, and blah, 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 which the guys all assured me, so as a club we went into bat for them, but it made a gossip column. So that's the difference in rugby league compared to soccer, So it made like a side column, like it was like, it made obviously the paper at Huddersfield for a day, but other than that, it was just in a little side column. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking this is going to be everywhere forever and a day. And
wow,
that was a big. If that was Australia, that'd be front page for a long time. Guilty or innocent.
Yeah,
guilty or innocent would be front page for a long time.
Yeah. Well, what about in terms of excuse me, the sort of standards of players? Obviously, there is more participation numbers here than there, but did you find there was a difference in class?
What I found was there was a very difference in, I suppose, obviously the way the game's played in England different, the way it's refereed different, but the biggest difference I found is that, in my time there, when I was advising people about players coming to Australia, I could hang my hat on English forwards, but I didn't have any confidence in sending English outside backs here because the games are so different. That's where the big difference is for me. The pace of the game's different, and I suppose the type of athlete and the challenges for backs in Australia over there is different, and the challenge for the forwards in England is very different to here, but it gets them ready to come to Australia and dominate. I think the young, you watch a young English forward at 17 like yourself and Johnny Bateman and Sam Burgess, Elliot Whitehead, they all start playing first grade at 17, and in winter it's a bit slow and tough, isn't it? And they get you get the shit beat out of you. Where the young 17-year-old kid in the show, he's playing SG Ball or Matthews Cup or under 20s, and the young English forwards, they get a real tough grounding early on in their age group, and if they come through that, you can bank out on they're going to play good in the NRL.
Yeah, you're right. I guess those dark days in playing winter rugby back home, because as a kid, that's what we used to play.
And the game's administered different over there. Like what's deemed as a penalty here and a penalty over there, it's harder. It's a bit more dirt. It's dirtier in England, isn't it? It's like the rules are different. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely no such thing as a fast track.
No.
Yeah, you wouldn't turn up today. It's going to be a quick game today. Get the scoreboard ticking over. He's going to be working overtime up there. There was some slogs of games that we used to play in.
And if you look at all the English forwards that have come out in I suppose my generation of when I've been in England, that period of time, pretty much all of them start playing Super League at 17 or 18 and playing big minutes against some men who wanted to have something to say to them too, didn't they? So it was very, very difficult. You watch them come through that and you just think this bloke will go to the NRL and he'll play very, very well. Yeah. And the whole lot of them that come out here do very well.
The English forwards do tend to
go.
But
the backs tend to, it's because the games are so different, the English backs don't get challenged near as much as the Australian backs do. And then when they come out here, the game's very difficult for them, and it can be quite hard for them.
There's some very big athletic outside backs here, so that's the competition as well. You've got to be, if you're playing centre 3/4 or on the wing, you've got to be body hardened from a very young age.
A very young age.
Yeah. 2014, mate. You left Huddersfield. You go to St Helens, and then 2014, you win the grand final with Saints, but then you come back here. Why did you leave the championship winning team?
We sort of got to the time at Huddersfield where we were doing our fourth year at Huddersfield. We loved our time at Huddersfield. We got great support there from the chairman and the CEO. And we've been there 4 years. We initially went for 2, maybe 3. And we got to the stage where the family were keen to come home. We felt we'd taken Huddersfield to a certain level. Coming home seemed to be like a good idea. And then Mike Rush and Eamon rang up and said, would you like to come and coach St Helens? I said, shit. Because St Helens is obviously a club that's been at the high end of the table, as we were just talking about in European sport. They're one of those clubs, aren't they? And those jobs don't come along every day, obviously. And so Eamon McManus, the owner of St Helens, as you know Eamon very well, obviously, the chairman, he come over to see us at Yorkshire, and he wanted to give me a spiel. I said, Eamon, I know how good your club is. You need to talk to the lady over there, not me. I said, because if she's happy to stay for a bit longer, we'll stay, So we did the 2 years, and that was 6 years there. And my wife comes from a very tight family and close family, and she just, she was getting to a stage where we've been here 6 years. We've got 4 young kids who aren't around any family. Our grandparents are healthy. Both my mum and dad are healthy. Still are now, and so is my wife's mum and dad. So it was much harder to leave St Helens than what people think, because, to leave a club like that where you got to be a wombat not to do any good there, because they're very, very well organised from the bottom up and very well organised at the top, as you know. So you generally got a very good, reasonable squad to work with, So unless you have bad luck, you're challenging, I sort of sum St Helens up. I sort of put them a lot like the Roosters, They develop very, very elite young players through their academy, and then the coach identifies a talented player who's experienced to go and buy, the chairman over there's like Uncle Nick here. He throws punches and they seem to land all the time. They do. So you actually, as a coach, you just get such an amazing opportunity to do well, and those jobs, they don't come along every day in sport in the world anywhere. As I said, you talk about European countries and, it's like the Real Madrid job, like a coach like Carlo Ancelotti went there, did well, got the sack, got to go back there. Like they're just not jobs that come around every day, And
he left Everton as well. Ancelotti, what was he thinking?
Yeah, I can't believe it.
Why would you leave?
They're wonderful jobs,
Everton
aren't they?
For Madrid?
They're wonderful jobs, aren't they? And there was a period of time in Australia said when the Broncos, then there's like the Bulldogs had that in the 80s, like they had numbers of coaches, and the Roosters are obviously a very powerful club now in Australia, and those jobs just don't come up every day, So to leave St Helens was very difficult from that point of view, and a wonderful club, but it's just a long way away, and it was time to come home.
Yeah. So when you came back, did you have the Newcastle job lined up, or that?
No, I had nothing. No,
you had nothing.
No job. Yeah, so I didn't work that year. I did a bit of consultancy work for Melbourne Storm. I just wrote some reports and all that type of stuff there. What else did I do? Where we're sitting here now, there's a lot of trees here. Old mate of mine, Pete the Greek, he got the chainsaw, he cut them down, I carried him up the hill. So I actually probably worked harder than I ever worked in my life.
And when the Newcastle Knights job came up, it was fair to say you probably assessed it as a rebuild project.
Oh, that was a tough gig, yeah. I knew it was a tough gig, and it was probably, again, harder than what you realise. The club had been through a lot of different things had gone against Newcastle over a period of time, with obviously, the failed ownership with money, and the Alex McKinnon situation was not a great thing for the club, and Newcastle as a club had always been a club that, from a financial point of view, had always sort of battled on, I suppose, so it was a difficult job, but one that I was excited about, and it's places to live. That's the spot where you want to live. Newcastle's a great place. Yeah.
Do you think they advanced under you?
Oh well, look, we felt we were making good progress. We played. My first 2 years there. As I said to the board, with where we were cap wise and what we had to do to try and fix the cap, and we didn't really sign anyone. We didn't really have any money to do so because of our cap situation. We picked up a couple of, I think we traded out of Choki Iwade and brought in Jamie Buhrer. We got big Paulie from Parramatta, and other than that first 2 years, we didn't have any room to do anything, and so it was a matter of we just played, lots of kids. I think the first round one, I think we debuted 9 or 10 kids in round one in my first year there, for example, and they were kids that weren't ready to play. We all knew that, and it was very difficult for a lot of the younger players my first 2 years there. It's hard being a coach, would have been harder being them because I remember telling the young Safidi boys, the NRL's much easier than what you blokes are getting. It's not as difficult as what it is for you at the moment because they're all playing together. They weren't playing with other elite NRL players. They weren't necessarily playing with hardened pros neither. They were playing with each other and young kids. So it was a difficult time, but we felt by year 4, we had a sort of 10-week period there. We beat Roosters, South, Broncos, Parramatta, all top 8 sides, and top 4 sides were going really well. But that other people made decisions they didn't want me there anymore, and that's the way coaching goes sometimes. So it would have been nice to stay there a bit longer, and I suppose get to work with the boys as they become more NRL players. And obviously, we brought Pearce in, and Kalen was a young player, and we certainly had a bit of luck in the recruitment market for him. Luck, or whether it's luck, good management or what, I'm not too sure, but some things worked out well for the roster wise, with a half and a fullback. But coaching doesn't always work out how you want it to, that's for sure.
Yeah. So you moved away from the Knights and took on a role at the Warriors without ever. Did you ever actually coach in New Zealand?
No, I never got to New Zealand. Never experienced coaching over there. Unfortunately, it would have been good to get over there and live and coach, and that would have been great, because a lot of people probably don't understand, what they've been through, because even as today goes, they're still living in Brisbane. They're not living in New Zealand. They're actually flying back to play. So their last 10 games are on the road. So they might be playing at New Zealand, but it's been a hard time for the club. They're the only club that's got an individual owner. which is I don't know what the numbers have been, would have cost Robbo a lot of money. He's never flinched. But the worst thing it's done for the club is, which people don't realise, is, and this is before I took over, like they had put some things in place to help with their recruitment. They put an SG ball side in for the first time in the history of the club, which was going to have a big impact on the recruitment. And obviously COVID sort of wiped that out, because we've not been able to travel. So they'd put some really good things. They'd started to set up a really good academy. They'd had some things in place, Mooks and Brian Smith and Sully, and they'd started to do some things there which were going to help the club, which by now, if COVID didn't happen, like now the club would be in a far, far stronger spot, So it's had a much bigger effect on the Warriors than it has on any other club. And I know people say, but you get an allowance and you get this and you get that, and you live in a nice motel and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is, if it was good to live in another country, the Melbourne Storm and Roosters would pack up and move to New Zealand tomorrow and they'd play out of there, because it ain't a good idea. And under difficult circumstances, the club's managed itself quite well, from the CEO, the owner, and they've done really well to keep the club alive in New Zealand, and they've done well to keep the boys. We only saw them play Melbourne last week. They're still competing, which is great.
So when exactly did you take over that job with the Warriors? Was that
second year of COVID?
Second year of COVID. So you didn't go through the whole full
No, I didn't.
No,
I just did. I did second year and what of this year?
Yeah. How was that I guess there is more to coaching than studs in the grass.
Yeah.
You manage salary cap and board members and all the media. But how was it actually dealing with players that, had been away for so long? And like you say, being in a camp environment, that's almost like representative style football. Like
for some players at the Warriors has actually been great. For some players being away and witnessing new things, it's been great. There's obviously some blokes grow up in harder areas at times, don't they? And leaving that environment is what they actually need to change their lifestyle, to change the way they conduct themselves away from the field. And so there's been the odd player that I'd say it's been a real bonus for. But as a whole, that's extremely challenging. And, probably, the general fan and the general media people always talk about the player. But some of the things some of the staff have been through, like, there's numbers of staff members that, married that have been away for 2 years, like living in another country for 2 years. Some with daughters that live in another country for 2 years, like everyone talks about the players. The players generally over the course of the time, the game did well and got the players' partners out here, which was great. And some of the players did it tough for a while because they couldn't. And sometimes, we had Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, whose family didn't come out. So there was some really tough experiences. Some of the players for different reasons, but as a whole, some of the staff did it a lot harder than some of the players. Yeah.
Did you have like proper welfare support, or were you bearing the brunt of that as well?
Look, CEO was out here. There was plenty of there always had a footy manager there, and we had a welfare officer. So it wasn't like anyone ignored. No one was being ignored, but there was some difficult times for people for different reasons, I'd say. But I was always mindful of some of the staff because. You pick up the paper and you pick up this, and it's often about the player. And there was some staff that probably did it from a personal point of view harder than the players. Not that you'd know through their work, but just from a point of view that it's not a easy thing, and understand it's not easy for them to do. For me, we're at Tamworth, then we're at Terrigal, and my family's at Cronulla. Then I'm at Gold Coast, then I'm at Brisbane, and my family's at Cronulla. It's an hour's flight. It's pretty easy. They can still come and see. Where in New Zealand, another country, and all the borders are closed. Very difficult for some of them at different times, but that's all coming to an end now. And they're a good footy club, mate. They're a good footy club. When you talk to any Aussie that have been there before me, that had lived in Auckland and had spent their time at the club, they've got great fond memories of the club. And so I'm looking forward to seeing them get in place what they were trying to put in place, and then see where they sit in 2 or 3 years. I think they'll make some good progress.
Yeah, well, that was actually going to be my next question. What do the Warriors have to do to become an NRL powerhouse? Because I think they've got a lot of things going for them, a lot of things in their favour, like a huge home ground advantage when they play at home, a huge potential nursery, an individual owner, which has its pros and cons, but if you use it to your pro. And
I think a couple of things. The stuff that they had put in place before COVID started, those things, they keep doing that. That was, as I said, they had an SG ball team, which people might think, oh, it's only an SG ball team, but what they'd identified as a club was that you got a lot of kids that are 16 and 17 that they're getting offered to go to the Roosters or getting offered to go to the Broncos or the Knights or whatever club may be, where the Warriors couldn't offer football for a young kid in a Warriors jumper. So a lot of families would much rather their kid come out here and play because they've got a system to get into. So the Warriors had identified that and put that in place. As I said, COVID sort of killed that off, and having another team, whether it be a reserve grade or whether it be a under 21s, whichever one it is that the club decides is the most important. Those things so that young kids can identify the Warriors jumper at a young age, because the best clubs for me, you talk about Storm and Roosters, and they develop players, sort of experience things. In particular, the Roosters, if you look at a lot of the Rooster sides that have won the grand final in the last sort of few years, a lot of their players played SG ball and played flag with the Roosters, so they identify the jumper early. I believe that's an important thing which they'd already had in place, but COVID stopped. They're putting a good academy in place. Again, to continue to do those things is really important for them. And I think, if I'm being honest, and this is only after experience and being there, and this is not me with the Warriors hat on, I think the game could probably, someone like the Warriors probably deserves more funding than other places, because New Zealand is a country on its own. And to have an individual owner that has to foot the bill for an SG ball side, foot the bill for reserve grade or whatever side it is, there's not much expense here in Australia travel-wise, so I believe the game could probably help there a little bit, because ultimately I think everyone would agree the Warriors being strong will be great for the game. Being consistently around the money, would be great for the game, I believe. And I think, finance is needed to do the things that the Warriors need to do. And as I said, Robbo hasn't shirked his hand once. An individual owner, he's never once shirked his hand at what he's needed to do as a commitment. But I do believe that the Warriors have had some issues over time because they've had different owners and change of ownerships. It would be great if Robbo and Ortex could stay there for a long period of time. It gives them stability, but also be nice for the game to probably look at some ways of giving them a bit of extra funding, because they actually do deserve it and need it, because it's very expensive to do the things you need to do to help them become a powerhouse.
Yeah, well, it seemed like a win-win, wouldn't it? Because if the game grows in New Zealand, it's just a huge untapped market. Obviously, the All Blacks, whether we could ever imagine getting above the All Blacks, I don't know if that's achievable or not, but if we can start to tap into that market, obviously they've got a tremendous amount of talent and depth there. But to see some of those kids come over to league, I think it would make New Zealand Rugby League stronger, the Warriors stronger, and ultimately the NRL stronger as well.
And as we stand at the moment, there's clearly not enough elite players in the game. And when I say that, I don't understand there's plenty of good players in the game, but to fill, the Dolphins coming in there's some teams now where we see a difference in the gap in the class of players at different clubs. If you look at the Dolphins, if Wayne Bennett can't attract enough good players quickly, that's because there ain't enough good players. So the more that other people develop players, so I know that obviously Parramatta's having a look at what they can do to develop more. The Dragons are looking at what they can do to develop more. If we can help New Zealand develop more, the Warriors and all these other clubs develop more players, we'll actually have more players. But there's less players around at the moment than what there was, say, 10, 15 years ago. Why, I can't answer those questions, but it'd be nice that if we can put things in place to help there be more players and make the that competition and the gap from the bottom to the top get a little bit closer.
During your time at the Warriors there, you would have had many a conversation with people. Do you think around New Zealand Rugby League in general, do you think an 18th team is a good idea over there?
I wouldn't have thought so at the moment, because I think the first foremost there should be things put in place where the NRL can chip in to help us, the Warriors be more successful. Yeah, and I don't see that as a disadvantage to the Roosters or the Dragons, and I see that as something that might help the Warriors a little bit in the short term, but it's going to help our game. And I believe that at the moment we need to make sure the Warriors are sustainable and strong before you worry about another New Zealand team. And when that's done and everything's well there, then they can work off a bit of a model there that can help, the game can help, so that if they do bring another New Zealand team in, at least it won't take as long for them to become successful.
Yeah, that's fair. Asking you with your coach's hat on, the current match review committee, disciplinary, it seems to be a lottery. What are your thoughts on where it's at as a coach at the moment? Do you think coaches purposely... Well, one of the things that seems to be a trend in the game is this hip drop tackle. I don't know if they've always been around and we've just not noticed them, or they're just becoming more prominent, or they're being coached now. What are your thoughts on the match review committee and trends like the hip drop tackle?
Well, look, there's no doubt, without making it, I'm not going to be talking about any clubs, but there's no doubt over the course of, in the last period of time, there's been certain techniques that have been brought in which, you know, whether they were deliberately done to injure people or whether they were just techniques people thought could help them do certain things to win. But there were certainly some techniques which needed to be addressed, there's no doubt about that. Has the hip drop been around for a long time? I'm not too sure. Is it just changing techniques, and is it the difference in athletes now? I'm not too sure about the hip drop one, but what I do know is in the match review committee, it's like being a referee. It's like having someone in the bunker. It's like coaches. It's like players. Whenever you've got human beings making decisions, there's always going to be discrepancy. There's always going to be a difference of opinion, and there's always going to be ones where they get it wrong. That's going to happen, you know, because that's what humans do. I suppose, unfortunately for the match review committee, and unfortunately, I suppose, for referees, is that, again, like I spoke about before, when you've got, you know, podcasts and you've got 100 Fox shows, 100 radio stations, you've got all these avenues for people to give an opinion, unfortunately, these people only get picked up on what they get wrong. They don't get picked up on what they get right. And that's the reality of it. And so you will be talking about match review committees long after we're dead, because I think human beings will be doing it and they'll make some mistakes. And that's the reality of it. And there will be inconsistencies. And sometimes if I'm a coach, I'll be sitting there thinking, how the friggin' hell that go against us? And other times you'll be thinking, I got lucky on that one.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking... Yeah. You sound very rational and very relaxed about it, but if one of your players was on the receiving end of what you perceive as a dangerous tackle, would you be on the blower the next day, or mate, would you just leave it to?
I give up ringing up all that stuff. As I said, when I learned some great lessons in my early coaching years. You know, as I said, I learnt that people give opinions. It doesn't mean that they're dark on you. They just give opinions and accept it. I also learnt referees get things wrong. I got fined a couple of times when I was young, carrying like a pork chop, saying things at press conferences. And what did I achieve out of it? Zero. So after a while I worked out, you're just best off putting your time and energy into coaching your team and doing the best you can with the group you've got. And it doesn't mean you might have a staff member that might ring up and get some things about just to keep, because sometimes you'll see some things you think, how's that work, you know? And the rules of the game these days are a bit transient too, aren't they? They change like coaches change, you know. So sometimes things can be seen a little bit different, but as a whole, yeah, you just got to get on with it. And sure, you see something go your way, and you might come home and kick the cat and get cranky, you know, like get the shits in the coach's office or something. But at the end of the day, carrying like a fool in the media, I've done that before. All it does is get you fined, and it does not change the result, and it does not do anything to change the match review committee anyway, because they're all like the rest of us, mate. They make mistakes, and they'll be making them. And the big one this week was the Nelson one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was a big one this week, and I reckon deep down, if I'm giving a coach's honest opinion, I reckon Melbourne would be going, oh, we got one there. We won that one.
Yeah.
We might have lost one 6 months ago or a year ago, but we got that one.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what you're going to get sometimes.
Yeah, fair play. I think that's us almost done, mate. I just want to ask you one last question. The infamous walk is on. Are you over it, or what are your thoughts on it? I know you've been asked about this plenty of times before.
It was just one of those things that I suppose the thing about it is obviously I was wired up, but the night before the game I sat with Gus. And Gus had been talking about walk coming on, because Gus used to always be terrified of the you know, your Lockyers and Langers
Yeah.
and these blokes through the middle part of the field. He was always on the case that they're going to challenge you through the middle of the field when you're tired, you know. And he drummed it into me. He said, mate, about Walker being on. So Loz had sent me out with a message. So I'd gone out with the message. This is how it unfolded. So I've gone out with the message. So I've run across wherever I had to get to give a message. And then when I'm running back off, I've seen Walker go on, and Gus had peppered me about it. You know, so I thought, shit, I better tell him Walker's on. So as everyone's witness, I'm across there, Walker's on. I've said it 8 million times. And then lo and behold, I get over there, and what's the first thing Laurie Daly says? Can you go and tell him Walker's on? I'm like, oh, fuck, Loz, what are you doing to me? You know? Yeah, so it was just one of those things that was good theatre for the game, I suppose. But I do get asked about it quite regularly. And because, I mean, with social media and internet these days, you know, like I did that. That was in 2000 and I reckon that was about 2001, I reckon that was. I think my oldest daughter might have been born then. Yeah, Isabella was born then, but all my kids know about Walkers On.
Yeah.
Where if that happened in the 70s or 80s, they wouldn't have a clue. You know, so yeah, you pay for your sins all the time now. You can't escape anything.
Yeah,
you can't escape anything.
No, do you get do people shout it to you in the street?
Yeah, 100% they do. Mate, the two things. Sadly, the two things.
It's almost like a catchphrase.
You look at Cameron Smith, right? He's remembered for 100 grand finals, 10 Origin wins. I'll go for a jog of a morning and I get a tradie. Dead set, it's tradies all the time. They're up early with the arm out the window having a dart. I get Browny Walkers on. or why don't you slap Barrett? They're the two things I go, you bludgers. They're the two things I'm remembered for, so... Me and Cameron Smith are remembered for vastly different things. But it's all people never forget those two things. Yeah,
and it's all light-hearted for you. You're not over it, because I think there's some comedians that are known for catchphrases, and they'll completely change how they look because they don't want people coming up to them like going there renowned catchphrase.
All you can do is just have a laugh. That's all you can do.
I guess that's it. Not take yourself too seriously.
No.
And just...
If you do, you won't last long in this game. I'll give you the tip.
All right, brilliant, Brownie. I really enjoyed sitting down with you, mate. It was a real pleasure to go down memory lane and explore what you might do in the future as well. I think any club would be better off with you in it, helping out especially those younger coaches, and the pathway system, not for just players, but also for coaches to learn from a guy like you that's, was the youngest ever NRL coach or non-playing NRL coach. So I think any club would be certainly benefiting from your experience.
I can always tell them what not to do anyway. Maybe not what to do, but I can tell them what not to do.
There we go. That's all you need sometimes.
That's a good start.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the Byron, Brownie.
No worries.